Go.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's virtual author event. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for supporting a locally owned independent bookstore in Books and Books by showing up and hopefully grabbing a book while you're here. Tonight, we are beyond thrilled to be able to host Raquel Vasquez Gilliland in conversation with Aida Salazar about her new novel, Cia Martinez and the Moonlit Beginning of Everything. Cia Martinez and the Moonlit Beginning of Everything is an otherworldly novel that manages to discuss immigration, racism, love, magic, and even UFOs in a concise and utterly gorgeous way. I truly loved it. Kristen Kishore said about it, it's a startlingly beautiful blend of so many things: mythology, spirituality, and the stark realities of racism and deportation in the US, coming of age and first love, and all of the best pop culture sci-fi, and aliens, and a kick-ass girl full of heart. You'll believe in these characters and in the wonders around them. And I completely agree with that quote. Raquel is a Mexican-American poet, novelist, and painter. She received an MFA in poetry from the University of Alaska Anchorage. She's most inspired by fog and seeds and the lineages of all things. When not writing, Raquel tells stories to her plants, and they tell her stories back. She lives in Tennessee with her beloved family and mountains. Raquel has published 2 books of poetry. Cia Martinez and the Moonlit Beginning of Everything is her first novel. Aida Salazar is an award-winning author and arts activist whose writings for adults and children explore issues of identity and social justice. She's the author of the middle grade verse novels, The Moon Within, The Land of the Cranes, and the nonfiction picture book, Jovita Wore Pants, the story of a revolutionary fighter. She is slated to co-edit with Yamile Said Mendez, Calling the Moon, a middle grade anthology of menstruation by writers of color being published by Candlewick in 2022. She is a founding member of Las Musas, a Latinx kidlit debut author collective, and her story By the Light of the Moon was adapted into a ballet production by the Sonoma Conservatory of Dance and is the first Chicana-themed ballet in history. She lives with her family of artists in a teal house in Oakland, California. So before I hand this over to Raquel and Aida, I want to point out a couple buttons on your screen. The one directly below me that is green and big says By Cia Martinez, and this one will take you to a link where you can purchase the book from us, which will promptly ship for you or prepare for store pickup. So it'll be there all night, and if you're watching back, it'll still work later. The other button is the Q&A button, which is going to be just a little bit smaller on the right-hand side over there. It says Ask a Question, and if you leave us one, we will use them later in the night. So without further ado, I'll hand this over to Raquel and Aida.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Well. Hello.
Hello, Aida. How are you?
I am so excited today to be here to honor you and to celebrate everything Cia Martinez and the Moonlit Beginning of Everything. It was such a pleasure to read this book, the advanced reader's copy. When it came to me, I literally curled up with it. I just fell in love with every page. It's such a remarkable work for so many reasons. And I'm really excited to be able to share with people what makes it so absolutely outstanding. And so is it okay if I throw some questions at you and
Please.
We'll start this conversation? All right.
Yeah.
So, it's often said that authors give birth to stories. And could you tell us a little bit about Cia Martinez's birth story, how you, Raquel Vasquez Gilliland, came to write the story of Cia?
Yeah. When this idea came to me, I was living in Tallahassee, Florida, and I had a baby, and I was working on my thesis. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Just checking. I was working on my MFA thesis in poetry from the University of Alaska Anchorage. And I was very busy, but I was taking a walk, and it was evening, and it's North Florida, so very sticky. And just looking at the sky, it was very beautiful. It reminded me of the sea. It was just seemed very endless. And I had this weird idea of a UFO crashing in the middle of it. And it was as though something had cracked an egg on my head. It was very, very visceral, very physical of the idea hitting me, you know. And I knew that the only occupant was an undocumented immigrant, and I knew she was looking for her daughter. And I don't know how many days later, I had another idea or vision of that daughter reading a letter in class to a boy who had been hateful to her. And it took, from then it took, oh gosh, I don't even know how long, several months before I could start it. And that was really how it came to me. It was very sudden and spontaneous, and I had to figure out how those two images fit together.
And did you write it in a full sitting, or was it little by little? Or
little by little? My son was a little over a year, and I was still nursing him, and that was really the only time I could be still. And so I would prop him up, have my notebook and my pen. I still have it here, actually, and write. I wrote most of it longhand.
Wow.
And then also while he naps, that was better because he wasn't kicking me, you know.
Right. Oh, wow. Wonderful. I mean, so you were kind of giving birth and nourishing a child at the same time. Fabulous. Okay, so there are so many themes in this book. The ties to family, to friendship, the theme of new love, of rewriting old narratives, and also maintaining respect for ancestors and land. But for me, one of the most beautiful and primordial themes is the mother-child bond. And I wonder if you can ask or tell us about, the inspiration to make this theme. Why this theme? Why is it? Because it's so central and so powerful in the book. And why did you choose to write this theme?
Well, I think the obvious answer is that I had just given birth pretty recently. But having my son was very traumatic for lots of reasons. And I spent the almost 1 year after him being unable to write anything. And I was just in a lot of pain, physical and emotional pain. And I honestly tried to write, and it was as though I were just completely empty. You know, the pen had run out of ink. There's like no way to get it back in, it seemed. But little did I know that the process of becoming a mother, because it feels as though it doesn't happen that first day. It's like the whole first year felt like a becoming. And as I nourished, like you said, and cared for my son and raised him and taught him how to speak and watched him learn things like metaphor and, spot his first little bug, like learning about the sizes of things and how there are different universes, like wherever you look, really. And that, I think, is what fed the story, because when I broke out of a block, I guess, I wrote 100 poems, I wrote a chapbook, and I wrote this novel, like in the span of a year. Yeah, it's a lot. But it was just pouring out, the ink had come back, and it was like the pen was, when you get a pen, it's a little loose and the ink is like a little stream of a river. That's how it was.
Beautiful. Well, so for you, which of the many themes do you think, or do you want readers to hold on to most?
Oh, I think it would be great if readers felt more awe and wonder at the world, because I feel the moments when I feel most connected to the humans around me, and the more than human world is when I am full of wonder. And that's the biggest thing I would love for readers to feel, is that wonder, because I feel wonder is the source. I keep saying the word feel. I'm trying to think of a new one. Like the source sensation of creativity is wonder. And the creativity is what connects us to everything. I feel like I'm getting really poetic now, but that's the biggest feeling, wonder and compassion, because I think they're very connected. So
yeah, no, and it's felt on the pages. I think that's what struck me about this poem. So I'm following. I actually hold that
fellow
word.
poet, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. All right. Well, do you want to talk genre? Because to me, Sia is not only it's been called a genre bending book, but I feel like it's more than that. It really is, to me, like a gender expansive, a genre expansive or meta genre book. And in that the lines are blurred. You've got you're like superimposing you know, the different genres and their race. They're undefinable in some ways, and you know, you use science fiction and contemporary and folklore and magical realism, I would say, poetry, romance, you know, all of this. And I'm sure I'm missing a bunch, but can you talk to us about how you went about crafting something like this, something so remarkably unique?
Sure, and thank you. I love it when people tell me how weird my book is. It's like
Yes,
it's one of the biggest compliments. Well, I think a big part of it was that I just finished reading and writing almost nothing but poetry. And so I hadn't really read a novel in a long time. I read a couple here and there, but my focus has been poetry. And I must have forgotten how the novel was supposed to look, because when I started writing, it came out almost like prose poetry, or in some chapters identical to my style of prose poetry. And I feel as though the genre thing is in the form, it's not unusual. Many authors have done it, but in this form of shorter chapters in prose poetry, I didn't pay attention to genre as much as form. And because of that, all of my interests, the sci-fi and the romance and the folklore and etc., they came out like and were kind of braiding together throughout the narrative. The first, I think, not the first, like the second feedback I received from it, from like an industry professional, was they said, "This is the strangest book I have ever read." And I have read a lot of books. And I was like, oh, that's so cool, because it's really, I just feel like it's really hard to be unique. So, yeah. So the genre thing came from not really paying attention to it and not thinking about the rules, you know.
So it was the form, a poetic form, essentially. Yeah, and in some ways, maybe this is a novel verse, but well, I don't know. I was especially moved by the folklore. For me, you know, that was attributed to Abuela in the story, and I wondered if you could tell us where those stories came, those beautiful, beautiful stories came from, and from which traditions did you draw or were inspired by, or were they made up?
Well, not you, but if anyone picks up my poetry, one of my favorite things to do is make up creation myths. I love the form of creation myths, which really are, if you look at them, most of them read like poetry. If not, they are in verse. Like, so that's one of my favorite things to do, is to make up creation myths. the beginning of worlds is kind of where my heart is, my creative heart. And so a lot of that is from my habit of making up creation myths. It's in the folklore, the familial and cultural folklore. But there are things that have been influenced by what I've been told by my family. I mean, we've all grown up being threatened with La Llorona, and so she made her way in there. But I changed the story because I don't really like the story of La Llorona, like the original story. It's dreadful. Yes, she's, you know, in the original story, she's a murderer. She murders her children. At least that's the one we told. And I'm like, no, this is a woman who snapped. You know, this man didn't treat her well. I can tell. I can just feel it. So I wanted to interpret that in a little bit of a more, she's less of a perpetrator and more of a survivor. So, so I did twist that a little. And my grandmother has always told us that we're descended from Mayans. We obviously can't prove it, and we do have some traditions that I have been researching that there's evidence that they come from pre-Columbian sources, or the source is pre-Columbian. But there is the chapter you would like me to read is inspired by something that she has told us. Only in her story, it's about monkeys. But when I encounter this creation myth, it was about all animals. So that connection really appealed to me, and so I included it in Sia. Only I made it my own and her own, Sia's character. So
it's so successful, absolutely successful, because it really kind of for somebody who loves folklore and myth, it really made me go, I've never heard this story before. How come I feel so robbed? How come I don't know this story? But I'm happy to know that some of it is made up. I recognize the La Llorona folklore, but yeah, it was fantastic. And I could, you know, when I was reading, I could totally see your grandmother. Early on, when we first met online, you shared a beautiful blog post about your journey to being a writer, and you shared a picture of your grandmother with a big, beautiful flower arrangement in her hair. And when I was reading this book, that's who I saw. I saw that face with the is that who you saw?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, let me think about this for a second. Yeah, and almost every book I've written, in book 2, it's a tia, but book 3, there's an abuela. Book 4, there's an abuela-like neighbor. So every book there is a maternal guide who is I can totally see the influence from my grandmother. We call her Nana. So what I actually read, that Nana is what is a Nawat for grandmother.
Yes.
Nawat? Yeah.
Yeah.
That, I was like,
his grandfather.
Yeah, I was like, wow, because I read a list of the indigenous words, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my mom. I called my mom to tell her this word means this. Cochino was one of them. It means pig. What we heard it growing up, it means dirty. Growing up.
Yeah, and also pig.
Yeah, and pig. So
they say cochino instead of puerco.
Yeah, and so I mean that was very emotional for me because it's hard to be disconnected, and then if you see that breadcrumbs sort of in the language I grew up listening to, so
yeah. Well, I like to believe that those little breadcrumbs are actually forms of resistance against colonization. You know, that they're that's what survived, and that we you know, we're pushing through despite. All right, I have a few more questions for you.
Okay.
There the issue of sexual assault is very much a part of Sia's journey, and I guess I should warn trigger warning here for anybody who might feel that what we're about to talk about is a little bit sensitive. You've been warned.
Take a little break.
Yeah, take a break, take a breath. So Sia's journey has this very powerful experience, and you have dealt with it so sensitively, so beautifully. And I just want you to talk to us about, how you went about rendering this.
We were taught so little about consent, not just at home, but also in school, like sex ed.
Yeah.
And it was a source of confusion for me as I navigated my first relationships as a young adult. And some of my experiences were very traumatic. So when I wrote about Sia's sexual assault in the vehicle with the first boy she had a date with, it was something very close to me, except that I wanted to see a girl overcoming it and struggling with it at the same time. The sort of 2 steps forward and 1 step back of healing from something traumatic. So her heart is closed to new relationships because of that, but then it opens a little bit when she meets her love interest. Then it closes again because she, has a flashback. Then it opens up. So I really wanted to give her a sensitive love interest who had an intuitive way of navigating her trauma.
Yes.
And I gave her a sensitive dad who is teaching her, empowering her to defend herself for if that should happen again, which for most women it happens multiple times. So,
yes.
So I want my gifts. These are my gifts to her that I didn't get. So I had to figure it out on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it came from.
Mm-hmm. And in some ways, and in every way, you're also giving it to youth who are going to be reading this. This is kind of a roadmap for them to an example of how to go through that process. It's wonderful. We're not going to reveal how it happens, but it's such an important part of the story. The book takes, for me, really takes a look at and commits to a very sharp critique of bigotry and hatred in our country, to the treatment of the undocumented, as well as it does a pointed critique of the colonizer state. And I wanted you to talk about your motivations to fold this very powerful commentary into the story. Why was that important?
Well, I started writing the book just before the 2016 election. So although the driving image of the book was a UFO crash, I couldn't help but braid in what I was seeing and hearing as far as racism and bigotry against undocumented people and Latinx people. Even hearing within my own family about my own family was very, very painful. So some of the things in the book, some chapters even, are me writing the things I couldn't say because I knew they couldn't hear me. So some of that came from there, and other parts of it came from hearing the stories of what my family has gone through, which I won't get into in detail because I've been asked not to, but listening to them, and my family has been through a lot of shit, so it's so painful, and I can see where actually my second book of poetry kind of details some of the violence and the trauma that's been passed on, the family trauma. So
Yes.
so it comes from a lot of different sources. The election is probably the most overt influence, I guess I could point to, but there's just so many layers. You're a novelist, right? There's so many layers that go into a book. Even ages later, you're figuring out, like, you have a conversation with someone and they see something in it that you didn't even know was there, but now you can see it too. So
yeah. And it to me, the story is so striking because of that. It kind of, in many ways, it's part of that genre-defying concept, in that it really is a critique of something that is a deep wound for our communities, and but also it's inspiring, right? Because it's the way that it comes out is so radically different than what we're seeing. I wrote a book that uses a different kind of metaphor, but this metaphor to me is heavy, because you're talking about like aliens, and I grew up undocumented, and on my residence card, when I was able to get residency when I was about 12, 13 years old, it said alien resident on my card. And so that it has a resonance, not only for people who've had resident alien cards, but people, illegal alien was a term that was just so powerfully weaponized against us. Mm-hmm. And so to have this force of these kids and a superpower mom kind of defy all of that was just so inspiring, and I was just rooting for her the whole time. So awesome.
Yeah. I was
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, go.
I just did an interview where someone had asked about the social justice and how it was conveyed with the speculative part. And I was like, I hadn't had anyone ask me that before, but I put it like this: what if Captain America were an undocumented immigrant? How would his decisions have been different if he had woken up and he was facing his oppressor with these powers? So
right. Yeah, exactly. Sia's mom is our hero, superhero. So the end of the book left me absolutely breathless. It's like, no, it can't be over. That's so mean. So I want to know if there's going to be a sequel.
Okay, I don't think, at least at this time, I don't have it in me to write one.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've reached the end continue to use the metaphor, the end of the ink for this story, but who knows? And and it is option to be a TV series. So
yay, congratulations!
So hopefully that will come to fruition, and we'll get to see the continuing of this story. And
are you can you share if you're going to be involved in the writing of it, or is that because I know that sometimes when things are optioned, then the original writer doesn't have anything to do with it, and they just make it their own.
It hasn't been picked up by network as far as I know, but if it is, then I will be included.
Good on you, and good on your agent who hustled that, because that's important. Because this is your world.
Elizabeth Bewley and Will Watkins, my film agent, also. I wanted to give them props.
That's right.
Both of them props. Right. Yeah.
For sure. So that might be in the future. I mean, what other things? What are your future projects? What are you working on?
Oh, I have something cool here.
Yeah.
So this is, hold on. This is the first draft of book two.
all longhand. So you really do
Yeah.
longhand. I do too.
Yeah, it feels good, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And I recently just wrote a book on Word, and it just I love the speed, but it's not me. But it worked for that novel. Let's hope. Actually, so
and is this in verse? I'm sorry, I didn't.
not book two. Book two is prose. It's coming out with Simon and Schuster. It's called How Moon Fuentes Fell in Love with the Universe. It's
Oh,
it's a romantic comedy. I needed to do something a little lighter next.
it's a young adult or adult?
Young adult. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so great. You know, speaking of which, I wanted to ask you about the verse. Like, we didn't even get a chance to talk about the poetry, and I wanted to see if you could read for us. I mean, because to me, this story has it felt like a novel in verse. It felt like the cadence about it had a cadence. It had a rhythm, and almost every page was just dripping with lyricism, and because of the images you conjure, and there was a use of white space. There's like one line chapters. To me, I was like, well, maybe I'm in a novel in verse, prose poem novel in verse. But I wondered if you could please read for us. My favorite passage was chapter 38.
Yes, I can do that. Mm-hmm. Let me pull it up.
And after you read, we'll be ready to open up for comments or questions.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay. Chapter 38. There it is. Okay. Before she died, Abuela told me that before we had trees and clouds and tomatoes, before even this earthly world, there was una familia. The mother had many children, but they were wicked and wanted dominion over all the worlds. They gathered each world and stuffed them in their pockets like they were pieces of carved jadeite. You can't just do that with a world. It's like snapping off a yam orange marigold and expecting to be able to lord over all the flowers now. Things don't work that way. The mother's youngest son knew each world was most perfect, most needed where it had grown its roots. While his siblings slept, the youngest took the world from their pockets and placed them gently back in the dirt, back where they came from. When the siblings discovered what had happened, they whipped out their weapons, a bow, a dagger, an arrow, a sword. The mother screamed so loudly she became the moon. The boy became the sun, and all the wicked older siblings turned into the wild things that live in the forests and deserts and sea. This is why wild animals so often sniff the dirt. They're still searching for worlds to steal. I know that the bad guys in the story, the siblings, became animals as a punishment. But ever since Abuela told me this tale, I've been jealous of them. Like, there are so many days when I want each part of my body to become something else. Not like the moon or sun, not bigger and more important. I want my arm to become a wren with a line of brown on the corner of its eye. My feet, a smooth gold puma. My hair, a coarse furred wolf. My hands, 2 stretching hairs. My hips, round river rocks. My nose, a bee drenched in pollen. My cells, bits of plankton that swim as though they are all one smooth body. Just whenever I need a break from being me all the time. And if I come across a world like carved jadeite, I'd peek to see if Mom existed within it. And maybe I'd just step inside the way we tiptoe toward a sanctuary. I'm tripping on that. A santuario at church.
Beautiful. Oh my God. So see what I'm talking about, my people? That is like, it just drips with so much poetry. Like, you just fall, fall so deep in love with that language. It's so beautiful.
Thank
I'm,
you.
it's been such a wonderful pleasure to enjoy this book, to have this conversation with you. And now if anybody in the audience has any questions, I'm sure Raquel will answer. Let's see, I think Christina was going to come back maybe, huh? Oh, there she is.
I don't hear her. I
I
have
don't hear
unmuted.
you. No.
It says mute. There's like a mute symbol for me on your face.
Christina, see if you can untoggle your sound. I can't seem to.
No, it's not. Well, I can begin. How about that? I'll begin looking at these questions. Let's see. Did you have movies or books that inspired you before writing Sia?
Yeah, I love the X-Files. I love
Clearly.
you didn't tell. I love Contact by Jodie Foster was like my favorite film from when I was 12 years old. And it was the question was movies.
Yeah.
Just
yeah, movies or books that inspired Sia.
Or books.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I'm sure there are lots of things that inspired it. Aristotle and Dante had influence. Mostly, it's hard for me to point to something because, like I said, I spent 4 years with poetry, but you can see the influence from. I think X-Files probably the most.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me now?
Oh yeah. There you are.
Yay. Sorry about that.
Mhm.
Okay, so the next question we have is, Sia is called genre bending. How did you approach the more speculative aspects of the book?
I approached it with what I wanted to see, and what I wanted to see was alien crash. I wanted to see interactions with aliens. I wanted to learn about who they were, where they had come from, why they were here, and I wanted to see a Latinx or Chicana superhero. And we have, not to spoil too much, but it happened. I wanted to see a young brown girl with powers, and that's, I mean, it's probably sounds self-indulgent, but I wanted to write what I wish I had seen when I was young. So that's how I approached it. I really wanted to write what I found to be cool, what I would have found to be really cool when I was 16 or 17, and put it in there.
I love the book, by the way. I got to read an early copy.
Thank you.
And it felt like something so different and new to me. Anyways, so the next question is, it's actually my question. I said that I love the cover of Sia. And I was asking you what role, if any, you played in its creation.
I am very lucky because I gave no input. They just my publisher, the designer. Hold on, it says it here, doesn't it? Laura Eckes is the designer. Jeff Osberg is the illustrator. And the team of those two just made this beautiful cover, and I had no input. Obviously I didn't need to have any input. It was just perfect from the start. And my agent said that's like really rare. So we're very lucky to have such a talented team.
It's perfect for the book. I love it. So what?
Except I would say that she's missing bell bottoms. I wanted bell bottoms.
You know, that, yeah. But
Right?
she's got her Converse on, you know?
She got her Converse. She got her Converse, but her bell bottoms. I was like, oh. The fashion in that book. Oh my God, I loved it.
Thank you. I love that decade, as you can probably tell. I don't typically wear it though. I dress more like an abuela hippie, you know, in my day-to-day life, not really like a young person.
So what made you guys gravitate towards writing for children or young adults versus in the adult space?
You want to answer first, Aida?
Yeah,
Because it says it's for both of us. Yeah.
For both of us? Okay. Well, my children, I was writing for adults. I got my MFA, writing poetry and experimental hybrid texts. And when I had children, I took them to the library and I didn't see any books that reflected their reality as multiracial, bicultural children. And so I started writing stories for them. And then I realized that it was actually a political gesture to be able to, fill in a gap that was missing. And so I started, trying to publish those books. And it's always been with that intention to give voice to children who haven't seen themselves reflected. Yeah. And here I am. And I really believe that writing stories are really important, but writing transformative stories like Sia and in the ones that I attempt to write are revolutionary. They're revolutionary actions, and because of my roots as an activist, that goes hand in hand. So that's why I write for children.
Beautiful. And can I just take a moment to say this is one of my favorite books I've read this year, The Moon Within by Aida Salazar. Just perfect. The chapters, the lyricism that goes with this beautiful plot of a girl becoming empowered with her body. And thank you for writing this beautiful book. I love it.
I feel like our books are cousins.
Yeah.
Because they're like Luna. I mean, they're so different, right? They're so different, but I think they're like, they're tied because of their moon sisters or moon cousins.
Yeah, they are. Okay, so I write. It's hard for me to say. I've always written young adult novels since I started writing novels. I think when I started writing novels, I was a young adult. I was 16 when I first tried to write my novel. So that's what I wanted to write, what I was feeling, what I was going through, except, in fantasy, that's what I first started with. And I stayed there. Almost every novel I wrote thereafter was young adult, including Sia and even the next book. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think I'm still writing for young adults because I want to give myself and other young people reading lessons and guidance that I never had and wish that I did. And some of that is seeing themselves as superheroes, and some of it is telling a young person who's gone through something traumatic, like sexual assault, that you will heal. Or even in this book, and more so in my next book, talking about the shame of having sexual experiences and being a young female, a young girl, because girls are mostly shamed for it, and getting over that. I don't know, just stuff I wish that I had known when I was little, when I was younger. Mm-hmm. I want to give that as gifts to others, so they can have what I never did. So I feel like I took forever to say that, but that's it.
No,
Yeah.
but you know what that means? Like I'm hearing that as medicine. You know, you're offering medicine, and that's a powerful thing.
Yeah, I hope so.
The next question I have is, how did you find your work in poetry has influenced your novel writing?
Well, it's I guess mainly like we discussed with the form. If I don't know if this this person asking has read the book, but if you have, the chapters are very short, and some of them are only paragraphs, some of them are only one line, some of them are only two lines, and that reflects my style of prose poetry. If you read my books of poetry, so I really feel as though it affects the form. And when I write prose, I listen for rhythm, and it's something that's been kind of fine-tuned from 4 years of reading and writing poetry, and it's hard for me to explain it. But even book 2 has more typical chapter lengths, but even in book 2, I look at a sentence, and it's as though I say we because I know you do this, Aida, as a poet. When you edit a poem, you're looking at the sound and the lines and the rhythm. And when I write prose, I'm like, that's not right, and I take out a word. And I know obviously not all novelists do that. I'm not sure. Maybe they do, but I feel as though my poetry training enables me to have more of a sensitivity to rhythm. So
absolutely, I see that, and I felt that throughout. That's why I kept saying this is a novel in verse. It's just, because it had that rhythm, that very powerful cadence, and it's very hypnotic. And I think that's what poetry does, right? That pulls you through and keeps you in the poem, and it's
incantatory. That's what we said in MFA.
Yeah.
Incantatory, yeah.
Yes, it's the music of the line is right, like that. What you've captured. Yeah.
I was just curious because the chapter lengths for me were part of what made it so like new to read, because I've read novels in verse and I've read novels with varying chapter sizes, but these are like, there's micro chapters, like they're kind of all over the place, but it works so well. I was just wondering if like in publishing, if coming into the publishing industry with a YA novel, if there was like any pushback on the sort of like what I feel like you invented as a form a little bit.
Well, I did get some feedback that was kind of like, to boil down the message, it was something like, you don't really understand how chapters work. I would like to see this again once you fix these chapters.
Oh my God.
They defined like chapters for me. They're like, chapters have this, this, and this. And I was like, no, this is a style choice.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, I really feel like that's not for this book, this advice. So I'm going to keep going. And actually, that was the only pushback I got. And it was the very beginning. Everyone else, I didn't hear anything. Not even, everyone just accepted that this was what it was. So that was it.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another question here for you. What drew you to poetry? And do you have any poetry books you would recommend for teens?
Okay, I'm looking at my bookshelves. I love when people ask poetry recommendations. Hold on a second. My throat is getting tired. I don't typically talk this long anymore. Okay, what caught me in poetry? Well, actually, I just answered this question for an interview when I was in 5th grade. Jewel came out with her first album, which I got. And in the album art, it has some of her poems. And it was really the first time I had seen some of these forms before. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is something that I could do. And so I started to write poetry. And actually, I have her poetry book here because of that, that beautiful sort of initiation of poetry was through Jewel. And actually, when I was 16 years old, she picked my poem to win a contest. So she and I might have this maybe writerly connection. So maybe I'll recommend Jewel, A Night Without Armor. Hold on, let me look. Sorry if this is weird. Let me just see.
Not weird.
Okay. Poetry for kids. I wonder what age. Anything by Mary Oliver, I think, is going to work well, because she writes about the natural world and wonder very efficiently. I want to recommend one of my favorites, The Book of Medicines by Linda Hogan, who is an Indigenous writer. One of my favorites. I got this book signed. It was used, but it has her signature in it, so I'm so happy. But this book, it's just so deep, and she's just such a wonderful writer. I recommend everything really she's ever written. Let's see what else. I wish I could have prepared for this better, but
can I make a couple recommendations?
I'm just afraid to recommend something that might not be appropriate for younger people. So, but please go ahead.
That's true. Well, our former poet laureate, Juan Felipe Herrera, has an incredible body of work, like over 25 books of poetry, and they can start there. And he's got some that are for younger ages, but I think, young adults are okay reading for adult poetry. And I think, there's nothing, stopping them from doing it. And it shouldn't.
Okay.
Anyway. And then I would recommend also, Vicky Vertis. She's a Chicana poet who won the PEN award last year for her book Palm Fronds with a Throat Cut, and those are all beautiful poems.
So I think I'm going to ask you guys the last question.
Are we at time?
Yeah.
Close. I'm going to open my window. Go ahead.
I'm going to wrap it up with just asking you guys what you might be reading now, if there's anything you've read during quarantine you'd like to recommend to our audience.
Yeah.
So kind of another recommendation. One.
Is it just
for
anything? Anything?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me get them.
Well, I've read this book called Tia Martinez and the Beginning of Everything, that has just revolutionized my world, that I'm absolutely in love with. And I've actually been reading Edwidge Danticat a lot, and because I'm writing I'm working on a project about her, and like a bio picture book type thing, and I've been so I've been like diving into her work, and so I would recommend her whole body of work. Edwidge.
She's our local author. We love her.
Is she local?
Yeah.
Oh, lucky you. She's fantastic. I would recommend people read.
We adore her.
And then actually, quarantine's not going to be over, but I have a book coming out called Land of the Cranes, and you should read that.
Yay. I pre-ordered it. I'm excited about it. Okay, I have a few. I'm about to make a mess. Braiding Sweetgrass. I don't know if that can. Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Oh, I've heard of that.
It's a book of essays on indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teaching of plants. So
there's like a deluxe edition actually coming out this fall.
Oh, really?
Anything else about it? But I heard that.
It's beautiful. It's such it made me cry like 11 times. It's just so beautiful and touching. This is an older book, and I recently reread it and was like, holy crap, this is she's such a good writer. The Realm of Hungry Spirits by Lorraine Lopez. It's just, I don't know how to explain it. If you want to read a book,
I love the title.
yeah, it's a great title, a great story. Characterization, developing characters. This is a master class. So good. Beach read. I just read Beach read. It was my gift to myself for finishing book 4, and I think it's possibly my favorite romance of all time now. And I just love so many. It just goes to show how good it was. And I just finished Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel Lynn Solomon. Just this sweet YA romance, just heartwarming and wonderful. So
Great.
Oh, more.
You know, I should say also that, you know, we are part of Las Musas, this incredible collective of Latinx writers who are women or identify on the gender spectrum. I mean, on the female spectrum. And you know, if you want to, you know, this is the tip of the iceberg. There's so many more women writers who are publishing incredible work. Go to lasmusasbooks.com and you can see our work there.
Yeah.
We have a lot of local authors in Las Musas, and it's really.
Oh yes, that's right.
Yeah.
You and people hit that button, that buy button. You're not.
So first of all, I want to say thank you so much, Raquel, for launching this book with us this week, spending some time with us. Thank you, Aida, for the conversation. This has been wonderful. Thanks everyone who's tuned in from all over the place. And of course, the reminder that the green button at the bottom of your screen will take you where you need to go to buy this book very quickly. We'll ship it to you right away, or you can pick it up at any of our stores in Miami. Thank you guys again. Thanks to everyone, and we'll see you next time. Good night.
Thank you.